How's everyone doing today? This is going to be a very different video. I want to warn you straight away that I'm going to talk about some things in this video that could be potentially very triggering for some in regards to past trauma and things that could bring up some bad memories. And so I just want to warn that ahead of time. And I kind of want to stress that this is not necessarily going to be a fun video. It's a video that I've wanted to make for nearly a decade, and one that I wasn't sure if I ever would make, and one that I decided in the past few years I definitely wanted to make, and I've rehearsed this video so many times. I've sat here without the camera on, thought about how I'd say it, gone through ideas of how I would even approach talking about this, or if I even should. Because what I'm about to discuss actually has a lot of real world consequences for myself. And I got to a point where I realized that I felt like I wouldn't feel 100% like myself if I didn't talk about some of this stuff. And I knew I eventually wanted to. And recently, if you saw, I did an interview with Corey Coleman from Double Toasted, formerly Spill, somebody I respect to an absurd degree. I loved watching Spill when I first started on YouTube, and I still love watching Double Toasted. And during the interview, he asked me some questions about making movies as a kid and people I used to hang out with as a kid. And I realized that I couldn't really truthfully answer his questions unless I decided to just be honest about my childhood and how I was raised. So I decided, whatever, I guess it's time to rip the Band-Aid off and just talk about some things that I guess for your average person probably doesn't really seem all that crazy. Everyone has been raised potentially in a religion or not in a religion, and you get older, you decide if you want to stay or not. When you're raised Jehovah's Witness, like me, the consequences of leaving that religion are disastrous. So yeah, I was born into a Jehovah's Witness family, and I've dealt with repercussions of leaving that faith about 10 years ago, for the entirety of that 10-year period. So let's start at the beginning. And I must warn you, this is going to be a long video, but it's something that I really have to get off my chest. And my goal with it is that if any other people out there who are either currently Jehovah's Witnesses or are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses feeling alone, suicidal, like they don't have anyone to share this feeling with, I hope that in some way this can be cathartic for you, and perhaps let you know that you are not alone and that there are a lot of people out there who have dealt with this situation and have succeeded and have moved past it, and their lives are better as a result. And so I'm really hoping that in some way this can help you. My parents converted to this faith in the 1970s, and I was born in the late 80s. And so at that point, both of my sisters, who are older than me, were also Jehovah's Witnesses, and that was just the way life was. Essentially, their teaching is that at one point in time, God is going to decide that the wickedness that he sees on the planet has gone too far, and he will bring about Armageddon, which the Jehovah's Witnesses teach as a literal wiping out of all evil. So in the main Jehovah's Witness publications, Watchtower and Awake, they print images like this of fire coming down from the sky, consuming you, and killing you if you are not on the right side.
But the wicked will perish, the enemies of Jehovah will vanish like glorious pastures. Particularly, they will vanish like smoke. So I thought this would be a nice memory aid. This verse stay in the mind. Here's what Jehovah's promising. Okay. That's Jehovah's enemies.
They teach that if you make it through Armageddon, that there will then be a paradise earth, a place where everyone lives in peace and harmony, forever, with no sickness and no death. The animals live with you, lions and snakes, and it's all a perfect, harmonious existence. And that the only way to get to that everlasting life on earth is to be as sinless as possible. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are very strict about what is a sin and what isn't. Now, the Ten Commandments are pretty much obvious, but there's a lot of extra things that Jehovah's Witnesses teach as well that I was taught for most of my young life, and that is no smoking, no recreational drugs, premarital sex, even things like pornography or masturbation can get you ousted from the religion. And when I say ousted from the religion, I don't mean that they just say, like, you're not a Jehovah's Witness anymore, but that's okay. If you are what's called disfellowshipped, once you are baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, your Jehovah's Witness friends and family are not permitted to speak to you ever again. Even your parents, man, your brothers, your sisters, if they're Jehovah's Witnesses and you're disfellowshipped, say goodbye to your life. I have a friend I'm still friends with who came out as gay when he was a Jehovah's Witness, and his family kicked him out of the house. He was homeless, like actually homeless. And now he has told me that his parents, they actually tell people that they have 4 children, even though they have 5. They pretend like he doesn't exist. So the Jehovah's Witnesses are also very homophobic and obviously transphobic and phobic, anything phobic, anything that's not exactly what they teach.
There will be many others who will come back who will have to abandon their former way of life. I was thinking, as an example, a homosexual. Now, this former homosexual comes back in the resurrection, and he really thought, and he was taught, and he came to believe that God accepted him with that lifestyle. But now he's going to learn about Jehovah's moral standards. And he's going to learn that Jehovah will not lower his standard to accommodate us. We have to come up to Jehovah's standard. Will he change? Will he adjust? It'll be up to him. But you, brothers and sisters, will help such ones to enjoy life eternal. All must learn to walk in Jehovah's righteous ways and willingly choose to do so.
The consequences of even me making this video will likely result in my father never speaking to me again. Because even though I left this organization 10 years ago, I was never officially disfellowshipped. So technically, as I talk about this right now, on paper somewhere, I am in a file cabinet, Jehovah's Witness, somewhere in one of their kingdom halls. But making this video now, I will be labeled what's called an apostate. Now, an apostate in Jehovah's Witness language, that's worse than saying child predator. It's someone who was a Jehovah's Witness, left the faith, and is now actively speaking out against it. That's known as apostasy, and I will be disfellowshipped for talking about this, I'm sure. And my father will have to choose whether or not he wants to speak to me ever again, and knowing him, he won't. I know this sounds crazy to the average person, but if you have ever been a Jehovah's Witness before or know anyone who is, this is everyday life.
The apostates and the enemies of Jehovah would say, well, that's gruesome. That's despicable. You teach your people these things? No, God teaches his people these things. This is what he's foretelling. And frankly, for friends of Jehovah God, how reassuring that they're finally going to be gone. All these despicable enemies that have just reproached Jehovah's name, destroyed, never, ever to live again. Now, it's not that we rejoice in someone's death, but when it comes to God's enemies, finally.
After leaving that faith in my early 20s, I realized that I sort of had, it was almost like having 2 brains. I have my current brain that I know, and that's just the way the world is, and I get it. But I still remember how I used to think and operate as a Jehovah's Witness, because you are brainwashed. You are conditioned to believe all of those things are true, and that the consequences that come with breaking those rules are literally death. And so one of my childhood friends that I knew my whole life, when he decided to leave the organization when he was like 15, I was told to never speak to him again. And I didn't. I mean, this is somebody that I hung out with every week. That I saw, you know, 2, 3 times a week. We spent the night at each other's houses, played games, legitimately like a real blood relative. Never spoke to him again until, of course, I left the faith and we reconnected, and now we're great. We talk all the time, and it's beautiful. But for like a 5, 6 year period before I left, I never spoke to him. There was a time when I was at my friend's house, of course, a fellow Jehovah's Witness friend, and this kid, our former friend, showed up at the doorstep, and my friend opened the door. I was in the other room, and this kid, he said, "Look, I just want to talk with you guys. I'm not going to try to get you to leave this religion. I just want to talk with you. I've known you my whole life." And my friend at the door to him, this person we've seen so many times over the course of our life, said, "We can't talk to you because you're no longer one of us," and just shut the door. Didn't see him for 6, 7 years. That was normal. And so when I say that me making this video will make my father or perhaps a few other members of my family react in a certain way, I know that's true, because I did it to people too. And I'm endlessly ashamed about that. Part of the reason I wanted to talk about this was just to get a lot of that off my chest. So as a kid, I was taught all these things, and I went door to door and preached the good news, knocking on people's doors, trying to start Bible studies with people. I was encouraged to tell everyone at school that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I did. So you can imagine how that went. You know, I've talked in the past about not being popular at school, and it wasn't just because I was a nerd. It was also because everybody knew I was a Jehovah's Witness, and they made me a target because of that. One specific example, I remember the kid at a lunch table. He said that if I ever showed up on his doorstep, he would get his dad's shotgun. And the whole table just starts laughing, and it was like hilarious to everybody. But that was a normal thing, to be taunted in that way. So I also want to reiterate that if anybody watching, and I know that I have followers who are Jehovah's Witnesses and who are happy being Jehovah's Witnesses, my goal with this video is not to say, shame on you, you shouldn't do that. I know what a crisis of faith feels like, and I know how hard that was to realize that I was doing something I didn't believe anymore. I'm not trying to force that on you. So please don't think that. But that was a normal occurrence. And that is because I was told to tell everyone the good news about Jehovah. So I did. I got very into being a Jehovah's Witness as a kid. You know, I didn't know what else life could be. When you're raised in a bubble like that, the only people you associate with are other Jehovah's Witnesses. You're not allowed to associate with anyone outside of that religion. They even have a term for it. Anyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness is known as a worldly person to Jehovah's Witnesses. And they act as if they're very inclusive. They're the least inclusive faith. Not only, as I already said, are they homophobic and everything phobic, they have a name for people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. And it sort of creates this toxic feeling of superiority in your head, like you're better than everyone else, or that people are below you in some way, like they don't have a relationship with God like you do. It's honestly terrifying. And really the scariest part about being a Jehovah's Witness is that they have sort of a biblical in their heads justification for acting that way. They're told from talks from the platform at the Kingdom Hall, which is basically church. They're told from the Watchtower and Awake magazines that the Jehovah's Witness leaders publish that type of conduct is good and that's acceptable. And that means that you're doing something that God appreciates. Ousting people, shunning people, ostracizing victims of real terrible acts that are crimes even. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Australia, Australia has made a lot of leeway legally against Jehovah's Witnesses and the fact that they have covered up years and years and years of child sex abuse. And it's absolutely true. Trust me.
So if you're not satisfied that this person will not offend again, then you won't reprove. You'll disfellowship.
Yes.
And when the person's disfellowshipped, they then can still attend meetings and so on, but under some restriction, is that right?
Under a lot of restrictions.
Yes. And members of the congregation cannot associate with them socially.
Socially or spiritually.
Yes. But the person is still otherwise in the world and can associate with people outside of the church.
Yes.
And you don't take into consideration, do you, how people outside of the church might be kept safe from such a person whom you're not satisfied will not reoffend?
If they were outside the church and they were a close friend, I would tell them.
Well, and how would you know if they're a close friend and they're outside of the church?
Now, if they were a close friend of mine.
A close friend of yours?
If I was.
Yes.
If I associated with them.
Well, what about people who are not close friends of yours, others than outside of the church? You don't take any steps, do you, to protect them from this potential reoffending? You don't, do you? You're concerned with the congregation
Yeah,
principally, aren't you?
we're concerned with the congregations. We are shepherds of the congregation.
Yes, and you're not a shepherd to those who are not in the congregation.
No.
And as an organisation, in your experience, you don't seek to protect or take care of children who are outside of the congregation.
That's a broad statement.
Well, I can limit it.
Yeah, limit it,
In your
please.
decision on whether or not to disfellowship someone, you don't take consideration of children outside of the congregation.
Do take consideration of them, but what ability have we got to protect every child in Australia?
Well, what you can do is you can report to the child protection authorities.
And that is done in some cases.
But generally it's not done, is it?
No.
It's not done unless there's a legal requirement for it to be done, is there?
That is true.
Throughout my teenage years, I got closer to what's known as the elder body. Now, in the Jehovah's Witness faith, there is absolutely a hierarchy. They don't like to admit that, but it's true. At the top is the governing body. Now, these are a group of men who are in New York at what the Jehovah's Witnesses refer to as Bethel. It's the Jehovah's Witness headquarters. These men decide every single rule, principle, regulation for the Jehovah's Witness faith. They're the leaders. It's like a group of presidents, basically. They're the number one head honchos. Then there's people like circuit overseers. These are people who watch over a circuit, so like a group of kingdom halls in a specific state or area. District overseers. But at the top of what you might experience at your everyday kingdom hall is the elders. The elders are older men of the congregation, basically, that you can go to for advice. The thing about elders, though, is that they can also make sweeping declarations that destroy your entire lives. They're the ones who decide if you're disfellowshipped or not. I mean, they have the power to take away your family and friends forever. They have that. So it's terrifying. You're constantly terrified of sin. and you sort of develop a guilt complex because everything you do, even small things, like if a curse word slips out or something, it's like you feel like you're going to die at Armageddon. You feel like God's going to kill you because you said fuck. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. It was very traumatizing. So I was getting closer to the elder body, meaning the group of men, these elders, because I, as a teenager, wanted to be an elder one day. So I would do what's called auxiliary pioneering, meaning that you spend a certain amount of hours in the field ministry, the door-to-door work, going house to house, trying to start Bible studies with strangers. And at the time, it was 50 hours a month, so I did that for a while. And then eventually I regular pioneered, and at the time that was 70 hours of field service a month. When I was younger, like pre-13, I was not allowed to watch PG-13 movies uncut or rated R movies uncut. So I saw them on TV. I was allowed to watch some of them if they were on TV because they would be edited for content. I've talked a little bit about that in my videos, but now I can kind of contextualize the reason. Because Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely strict about movies, entertainment, music, all that kind of stuff. I'll give you a quick example to make it really easy. At one of my friend's graduation parties, I wore a shirt that had Michael Jackson on it. Now, Michael Jackson was also raised a Jehovah's Witness. It's one of the reasons why in his Thriller video, there's a text that appears at the beginning that says he wishes to distance himself from the occult. Because Michael Jackson, the fucking king of pop, is afraid of getting disfellowshipped. So I'm wearing this Michael Jackson shirt, and the elders have a meeting with me afterwards, after this graduation party at the Kingdom Hall. There's 3 elders sitting there in this back room. They lock the door. Now, an elders meeting is the scariest thing a Jehovah's Witness youth can endure, because you know that you go in there, they're either going to take something away from you that you like, some form of media or music that you have expressed you enjoy. They're going to tell you to not listen or watch that anymore. Or they could even impose restrictions on you and your friends and family, which also happened to me. In the case of this meeting, they asked me why I was wearing a Michael Jackson shirt. It's just fucking crazy to me. And I assumed it might have been because he was just coming off of like these the sexual assault allegations. But no, it was actually about the fact that he used to be a Jehovah's Witness and later left that faith. Why would I wear a shirt with somebody who used to be a Jehovah's Witness? And I was like, I don't know, man. I just like his music. It's a shirt. What do you want me to do? It was crazy. That kind of stuff happened to an extreme extent. But when I was 14, as you know, I developed a real interest in filmmaking. I saw movies in 2002 that really inspired me, and I wanted to make films. And so my mom, she bought me a video camera, and I made a lot of movies as a kid with my friends. Now, you guys know that, but what you don't know is that I was a Jehovah's Witness. So I was constantly trying to make movies that wouldn't offend anybody, that wouldn't get me in trouble with the elders. So use of language or extreme violence. My Indiana Jones movies were a big problem. All that punching. I got an elders meeting for making those, and they expressed to me like Bible scriptures about loving violence and all that stuff. And it got to a point where it was very clear, and again, I'm leaving a lot out here. I'm sort of giving you the Cliff Notes versions of these events, which I may go into detail more in the future in a book. It got to the point where it became very clear that they were trying to dissuade me from making films, that they felt that that was getting in the way of my service to Jehovah. Some of the movies that I ended up putting on YouTube, I did this thing called Marguerite Avenue Killings. Nobody got killed in it, though. It's just, because no violence. That got me in a lot of trouble. Somebody from another Kingdom Hall that I didn't even know figured out that I was a Jehovah's Witness because he knew who my family was. And he called the elders at my congregation and said he was deeply offended by this very amateur movie that some teenagers made in 2 days. And because of that, myself and my 2 Jehovah's Witness friends who helped me make it lost all of our congregation privileges for 6 months, which meant that we couldn't do things like give talks anymore or carry the microphones when people have a Q&A session. That's a very demoralizing experience, because once you're known for doing those things in the Kingdom Hall, you get sort of like respect, and people know you do that, and suddenly you're not allowed to, and they know you did something wrong. All we did was make a fucking movie. They were very slowly trying to chip away at my identity and keep me from being involved in film in any capacity. Eventually, I decided, stupidly, and I guess I'm sort of going back in the past a little bit from that experience, but I started my YouTube channel in 2009, and the goal was just to talk about like movies I saw. I wasn't going to look at anything that had demons in it or Christmas or, holidays or any of those things that I wasn't allowed to do, because I also forgot to mention Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate Christmas or Halloween or birthdays. I had my first Christmas when I was 24 and my first birthday when I was 24. First Halloween as well. The first time I got a Christmas present, I was actually, I was like shaking because I thought that I was sinning, and it's so crazy. I started talking about movies on the internet. They were very innocent reviews, no language, no cursing. I was still living with my parents at the time. And eventually, the elders became aware that I was talking about movies on the internet. And they had a meeting with me. And in so many words, they suggested that they didn't like that. Now, they couldn't outright tell me. They couldn't state in a sentence, do not review movies on the internet anymore. They couldn't state that because they know there is no biblical precedent for saying that. But man, they did everything but say it. They made it as clear as you possibly could. You'd have to be a complete imbecile to not understand that they were saying you probably should shut down your YouTube channel. So I did. You might remember, if you watched me at that time, that I uploaded a video in which I explained, without really explaining anything, that making these reviews, it's come to my attention that in some way it is harming myself or my family, and it could be detrimental to them. Well, I have some very unfortunate news that I want to talk to my subscribers about. For certain reasons, I'm unfortunately going to not be doing any more movie reviews. It's very difficult for me to be able to explain it to some of you because it's largely a very personal matter. Some things have happened in my life and in my family's life, and I need to make some reassessments about some of my priorities. So I won't be doing any more movie reviews, and it's not with happiness that I bring you this message. I enjoyed getting to do the movie reviews. I greatly enjoyed the very kind feedback I received from all of you, majority of the time. It was nice to be able to do that on a regular basis and share my thoughts. Fortunately, I don't have time for it anymore because of some personal things that have happened that I can't really talk about in full detail because it would become sort of an invasion of privacy. And my YouTube page was never a place where I, talked about my life and stuff. I was always very private. And so some things have happened that unfortunately are not going to, this is not going to work out for me to continue to do my reviews. I have other things in my life that are more important that I need to focus on. I apologize that I have to bring this message to you because I don't want to hurt any of you. I don't want to make you guys feel bad because I know that you all really enjoyed my videos, but I also have to recognize that I do have a life, a large portion of my life that a lot of you probably don't know about, that I've never gotten into, and that I'm not going to get into
here, but I just want you all to recognize, you see a lot of the people who do reviews on YouTube are teenagers in school. Some of the more successful ones are still teenagers, 17, 16, and they have a lot more time than I do in regards to certain things, and they have certain freedoms that I don't have. And even if I did have the same kind of freedoms that they have, some things have caused me to realize where my priorities should be. And I'm sure this is incredibly hard to understand for some of you because you don't know my life and you don't know what's important to me. And I just want you all to recognize that I greatly appreciate all of the kind things you've had to say, and the fact that you've watched my videos and supported my efforts to try to reach an audience with them. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to continue to do that. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll have this video up for a few days. That way the majority of my subscribers can see it. And then I'm going to be deleting my account. So you won't be able to message me through YouTube. I won't have my videos on anymore. And I'll probably do that by the next few days. I'm not going to do it immediately because I just want to make sure everyone can see this video so that they understand what happened. And then I will delete my account. Because, let me just say, I'll put it this way. Some stuff happened in regards to my reviews that could potentially cause some problems for some people, myself and my family, and some other people. And that's all I can say.
Nobody understood what the fuck I was talking about. I remember the comments on that video were like, "What happened? Are you okay? Is someone hurt? Are you all right?" You know, nobody understood because I couldn't just come out and say the Jehovah's Witnesses are forcing me to shut down my YouTube channel, which is exactly what was happening. That is the real reason I closed down my first channel. So 6 months or so go by, and I realized that I am falling extremely deep into depression. I have never been in a darker spot in my life. And that is when I had a real realization. I realized that I was using movies, games, anime, books, whatever, media in general, to distract myself from how depressed I was. And as soon as I didn't have an outlet to express myself in some way, and I was told, don't watch this, don't read this, don't play this, don't be involved with that, and all that was taken away from me, I realized that all I had left was being a good little Jehovah's Witness soldier. And the depression just caved in. And I legitimately was suicidal. During that period, it became very clear to me that without film, I was a devastated wreck. And a friend of mine at the time, who was not a Jehovah's Witness, she said to me, because I had started to talk to people outside of the faith for the first time ever, and it was a very interesting experience to sort of see someone else who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness look at me and say, like, what are you doing to yourself, man? So I was talking to her, and she said, did you like talking about film on the internet and engaging in that community, the film community, and talking about filmmaking and all that? I said, yeah. And she went, then why aren't you doing it? Sometimes someone just has to say something to you in a very simple way, a very direct way, and it just sort of floors you, and everything just becomes crystal clear. So I went, I don't know why I'm not doing it. And I went home and I thought a lot about that. And I realized that the elders at my congregation were slowly erasing my identity. They were trying to take away my love of filmmaking, trying to keep me and my friends from making movies. They had already scared my friends away from helping me with any movies by removing their congregation privileges just for helping me with one. So none of my Jehovah's Witness friends wanted to make movies with me anymore. They didn't like how I dressed. They were trying to keep me from talking about movies on YouTube. They didn't like that I was starting to get some success, even a little bit, on YouTube. And I essentially realized that I was being turned into like the Borg from Star Trek Next Generation. I was just becoming a mindless drone. And I know that sounds extreme, but it's not. It's true. A lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses refer to the faith as the Borg because that's how it feels, man. So I started my channel again. And that's the channel that you're listening to me on right now. I said, screw it. I want to do this with my life. And I want to be involved in film in some way. Naturally, the elders were very dissatisfied. And things went downhill from there. I began to feel spied on quite often. Going to the Kingdom Hall was no longer fun and welcoming. It was like I was being watched. It felt like there were eyes on my back all the time. Every little move I did was psychoanalyzed and examined. I'd end up in the elders' meetings. They'd shut me in that room, lock the door, and stare at me and just gang up on me and read me Bible scriptures about the fact that I was doing things that were inappropriate. I haven't even talked much about this, but they asked me quite often about very invasive things like, are you involved in masturbation or looking at pornography? They asked me all kinds of very strange, disturbing questions about my body, asked me if I was gay, all kinds of stuff. Anything they could do, really, to keep me a good little Jehovah's Witness soldier. It got to the point even where I moved one day with my family, and you can still see in this video for Thor, my Thor review, that I had just moved because like the background's all empty. I had seen Thor that day, and the elders found out that I had seen Thor and made a big fuss about it because Thor is a pagan god. So I got an elders meeting about watching Thor. Can you believe that shit, man? I'm sitting in a locked room, and elders are asking me why I watch Thor. The most disturbing part about this is that I knew that one of these three elders, sitting right over there, had also seen the film with his whole family. And I looked him in the eye and I said, "What's your opinion on that movie?" And he says, "My opinion doesn't matter." And I'm thinking to myself, yes, it fucking does, man. Because you can really bail me out of this situation. So they used that movie as a way to, again, convince me that what I was doing was wrong and that it was making Jehovah sad. That was one of the last meetings I ever attended. Because I remember sitting there thinking that everything they said sounded so fake. Every word out of their mouth sounded like a robot. And I became very uncomfortable. People that I had known my whole life, I mean, since I was a baby, talked to me like I was a different person. Because people could go online and see what movies I was watching. And they would see things like, oh, he reviewed, whatever, Shutter Island or something. And, oh, well, that's rated R. I can't believe that he's allowed to do that. And that became a thing. So going there felt like I was walking amongst aliens. At one point, this sort of brotherly, sisterly feeling of love that I felt there was gone entirely. I felt like I was part of a cult. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses are trained to react very strongly to that word, that they are not a cult. When you think of cults, you tend to think of like something out of Temple of Doom or whatever, you know. But modern day cults are very welcoming, and many of them are very easy to get inside. I firmly believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. I was raised in a cult, and I fled that cult to have a happy life and to make films. I distanced myself. I stopped going to the Kingdom Hall. I stopped going door to door. And a few weeks later, I find out that I have been what's called marked. Marked is not the same as disfellowshipped. When a person in the faith is marked, it means that an elder has given a talk or a speech to the entire congregation. In my case, the congregation that I went to had about 100 to 120 people. So he's standing in front of this crowd and he's talking about a certain kind of conduct that may apply to people in the congregation. They do not name the individual, but they make it as explicitly clear who it is. Similar to not being able to actually say, don't make YouTube videos, but making it very clear that's what they're saying. So they gave a talk about me. And they didn't warn me or my family. So my family's sitting there hearing a talk about their son. Someone in the congregation involved in discussing entertainment on the internet is not to be associated with unless he or she is actually present at the Kingdom Hall. So it's essentially being disfellowshipped, except for the fact that if you go to the Kingdom Hall, they can talk to you. Outside of the Kingdom Hall, though, they cannot. So I, in that moment, had been marked. The difference between being marked and disfellowshipped is actually gigantic. Because when you're disfellowshipped, you are ousted entirely. No one can speak to you unless it's like a funeral or some very important financial situation or something like that. Even if you're someone's kid and they're still living with you, you're not allowed to speak to them. It's crazy. It's crazy. Nevertheless, when you're disfellowshipped, you can work to be reinstated. You can keep going to the Kingdom Hall even though no one speaks to you, and eventually, many months or even years later, you might ask the elders for a meeting and say, I would like to be reinstated, and then they will decide whether or not you're worthy of reinstatement. Then they'll make an announcement from the platform, yes, so-and-so has been reinstated as a Jehovah's Witness, and now everybody can talk to you again. When you're marked, that's not how it works. They never confirm whether or not you're unmarked. They don't make a talk saying, that person we said was marked who we didn't name, they're no longer marked. You can associate with them again in private. It's actually kind of worse to be marked in a way, because there's never any confirmation to the other Jehovah's Witnesses whether or not you have worked to stop doing the thing that you were marked for. So, I wake up that day and I have a message on my phone. I am about to go and hang out with my lifelong best friend. We were going to get dinner that day. And I was going to express to him some of my concerns and the things that I was dealing with and ask for his help. Now, this is someone that I, similar to my friend that left when I was young, spent my whole life with. It got to a point where we were so close that I was closer to him than some of my own family members. I kept an air mattress at his house because of how often I spent the night there and just hung out with him. I mean, I'm talking 1 or 2 times a week I'd go to his house for my entire life. I have a message on my phone that's something like 17 seconds long, and it's from my best friend. And he says, Chris, I'm sorry, I can't go to dinner with you today. In fact, I can't really see you at all. You have been marked. I'm sorry. Click. And that's it. Just like that. Best friend in my entire life gone in an instant because I want to be involved in film.
I understand what you say, but can I just ask you this simple question? Why is it necessary when someone feels that they can no longer abide the organisation and has to dissociate, why is it necessary to shun them? Why can't they keep having social contact with those people who happen to remain in the organisation?
Well, I'd say again, and we're going to appear very repetitive, I apologise, Your Honour, but the individual can choose.
Why is it necessary for the organisation to tell all of its adherents, you must shun that person?
Because the individual has not taken the decision to no longer associate or to no longer be involved with congregation activities, which is their right. They've taken the decision to say, I'm shunning the congregation. I'm no longer a part of the congregation. I put it in writing. So the individual takes that action, and we understand the implications. When someone is disfellowshipped, the congregation takes that action. So the individual does not need to put themselves in a position where they're shunned. They can walk away. They can go to another congregation. That's their personal choice. But we understand and agree with the point you're making, Your Honour.
Well, you haven't answered the point, but we'll move on.
Answer the question, Mr. Smith. You have not answered his honest question. His honest question is, why is it necessary to shun the person who disassociates? And before you answer, let me clarify one thing. The person who disassociates, both you and Mr. O'Brien have now said it. You said that they shun the organisation. They don't necessarily at all. You're talking about someone who just doesn't want to be part of it anymore. They still want to have their friends, their family, and everything else, their social network. So accept that kind of person, but it disassociates. Now, why is it necessary to have a policy that everyone else must now shun them?
Again, that's a decision the person makes, because that individual...
Sphinx, that doesn't answer the
Mr.
question.
Stewart, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. I think we should.
Well, the real answer to the question is because you say the Bible says so. That's the answer, isn't it?
Yes, that's our understanding of the scriptural
Yes.
disfellowshipping and disassociation doctrine.
So that is the story of my goddamn life. I stopped going to Kingdom Hall, and I've never been officially disfellowshipped, so I have been able to briefly over the years speak with my parents. After publishing this video, that might change. In fact, it probably will, and I love my family. I do. I think that they did what they thought they were supposed to do. And I don't know if they fully realized just how much pain they caused their children. So yeah, that's a lot to take in, I know. And what I have learned from this situation is that really nothing's going to keep me from pursuing my dreams of filmmaking. Nothing. And I've realized that I'm never going to give up. It's just not going to happen. Because every time a challenge is presented to me, I always think, well, this is nothing like losing your entire friends and family. This is just like a hurdle that I have to try to jump. That's it, you know? And I've kept all this inside over the years because, to be completely honest, I'm very nervous about talking about these things because I just didn't want to read anything that didn't take this seriously, that mocked me, or that was negative. I know that the internet's a shitty place, and I didn't feel like it was a safe place to share. But I've seen so many videos that I've watched over the past few years with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses talking about how genuinely alone they feel. And it's a small community, you know? There's not a lot of people out there supporting them. And if in some way I can be a person that they look and say, okay, I'm not alone. Someone else has dealt with that and they're being honest about it, then great. Perfect. I'm happy. Certainly some of my scripts that I've written that I would like to make one day have little pieces of this in there. I've written one script that is about a cult, but I've sort of turned it into a fun experience, and I've sort of used that as a venting mechanism for me that I would love to make one day. It's actually my dream movie. So honestly, guys, just thanks for listening to this. I know this is probably really weird for a lot of folks. I will say that everyone I've ever worked with professionally on YouTube, I've told them this in private. They all know. All my friends know. You know, everybody knows. I never really talked publicly to you guys about it. And it's not like I'm just going to turn my channel into like, let's talk about cults, the channel. No, I just wanted to make a video about it. And like I said, I have been writing about it, sort of like a autobiography. And maybe one day I'll publish it, because there is a lot more that I've not shared. Plenty more that I've experienced and seen as a young kid that is possibly legally devastating to the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's shocking. It's genuinely shocking, the shit that goes on behind those closed doors. There's one more thing I want to talk about. Fuck. Do I want to talk? Fuck it. All right. I'll talk about it. I'll talk about everything else. So I'll talk about this too. One of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses also do is it makes you behind in everything. You're behind in socializing. You're behind in learning about your body. You're behind in being a normal person. That it takes you longer than most people to realize things about yourself, to have truths about yourself made known. So I'll just talk a little bit about something that I've realized over the past few years, and I've only shared with, honestly, like 5 or 6 people. When I was younger, and into my early 20s, when I was leaving the Jehovah's Witness faith, I referred to myself as straight. I'm not. I am not. Yeah. So, like I said, I probably would have realized this about myself a lot younger if the Jehovah's Witnesses weren't so restrictive about sexuality and if they weren't fucking homophobic.
I respect that they have a right to choose their lifestyle, but as a Bible reader,
Excuse me, I'm a Bible reader too. I go to church, and our church is one of the biggest supporters for this marathon. So what are you trying to say?
Displaying courage now will help me display courage in the future. Well, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believe the Bible teaches sex is for a man and a woman who are married.
Intolerant people.
Wow. That sure took courage.
That's what I told her. And I asked her to think about when the political powers destroy false religion. At that time, people won't want to admit that they're religious. And so for us to admit that we're Jehovah's Witnesses then, well, that's going to require the same type of courage as she displayed at that market.
Wow. I remember when Sally was just a little girl handing out tracts. And now look how well she's done.
As I got older, I began to realize that there were other things I liked as well. I love my wife very much. And you might think, well, you're married to a woman. Doesn't matter. Doesn't fucking matter. I am pansexual. If you don't know what pansexuality is, essentially you are attracted to all genders. And that's me. That's how I feel. When I first told my wife about this, she was really welcoming, and I have been given permission by her to say this. She is demi-pan, and so she was actually very excited. And if anything, this has actually made our relationship even better and more open. It took me a while to realize that, and then I kind of just bottled it in. I referred to myself publicly as straight for a long time because I was afraid of being officially disfellowshipped and losing my family. So now that I probably will be, fuck it. The world is a different place. I don't think people really care that much about this kind of stuff. I think people are a lot more welcoming nowadays. I just don't want to go around, acting like I'm different or something. There's just things that I'm tired of fucking keeping in. It's 2021. One of my New Year's resolutions was to be as honest about myself as possible. And I have definitely kept that resolution. I just would appreciate... I just don't want anything to change. I'm still me. I've always been me. This is always me. I'm never going to change me. This is who I am. Just being open and honest. And if anybody doesn't like the things that I said in this video... well, that's honestly, you're right, of course. But, whatever. It's my life. It's who I am. I really appreciate you guys watching this. I appreciate you guys watching my channel. Thank you again for listening. I think that's about it. Yeah, I don't have any other crazy things. But I'm honestly, I feel like a gigantic weight has been lifted from my shoulders, even just talking about this. So thank you for being an audience that I can discuss this with. If you guys want to know more about what it's like to be a Jehovah's Witness, there's 2 pieces of media I'd like to recommend. One is an excellent film called Apostasy, written and directed by a former Jehovah's Witness. You can find that on Amazon Prime. The other is an episode of Leah Remini's Scientology show that is currently on Netflix. She did a special episode all about Jehovah's Witnesses, and it is absolutely damning. It is thrilling. You can learn a lot from that. If you'd like to see more about the way ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are treated, those are 2 things I would highly recommend. Thank you so much once again, and again, to any